Hello and welcome back, my incredible AP Insight family. Abby Phillip here. The team here at Newscast jumped straight into group chats right after wrapping yesterday's broadcast. Why? Because the rumors exploded almost immediately. Whispers, unconfirmed tips, and wild speculation about one of the most explosive stories any journalist could face. When something this massive breaks, there's always that chaotic window where nothing is verified and everything feels like it could collapse into misinformation. We spent hours in limbo, unable to confirm if the reports were real. The claim in question, the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was gone, dead. The man who has held an unbreakable hold on power for more than 3.5 decades, enforcing a system critics call brutally repressive, was said to have been eliminated. It wasn't until later in the evening that U.S. President Donald Trump stepped forward publicly with the confirmation. In a direct post, he declared that one of history's most ruthless figures had met his end through coordinated Israeli and American military action. He framed it bluntly: justice delivered not just for Iranians long oppressed, but for Americans and citizens worldwide who suffered at the hands of Khamenei and those around him. Trump called it a turning point, a phrase thrown around too often, but in this case it carries real weight. This development forces the world to confront who takes the reins in Iran next. For the 90 million people inside the country, it's existential. They've endured decades of tight control, with recent memories still raw from government forces crushing street protests, leaving thousands dead just weeks earlier. But Iran sits right in the heart of one of the planet's most unstable regions, bordering Iraq, Afghanistan, Turkey, and close enough to send ripples toward Israel and beyond. Whatever unfolds there doesn't stay contained. Oil markets feel it instantly. Security threats reach far afield, including potential dangers aimed at Western nations. That's why this episode dives deep. We're bringing on BBC International editor Jeremy Bowen for insight. Laura's right here in the studio with me, and Patty's across from her. Jeremy will join us from home shortly. He's swamped on a day like this. Let's cut to what we actually know and what remains shrouded. From the information pieced together so far, a highly precise, multi-wave assault targeted key sites across Iran. Intelligence appears to have been exceptionally sharp, pinpointing leadership locations. Reports indicate the supreme leader was struck in his office within a secure compound alongside senior aides and possibly family members. This marks a weekend that will be etched in history books: the targeted killing of a head of state by U.S. and Israeli forces. Nothing comparable has happened since the 1979 Islamic Revolution that brought this system into being. Khamenei himself rose in its aftermath, assuming supreme authority around a decade later and maintaining it with unyielding force ever since, vowing Israel's destruction as a core stance. Almost as soon as word leaked, videos and images surfaced of crowds in Iranian streets rejoicing. Some women appeared without head coverings, a defiant act given the violent crackdowns on similar protests in recent times. At the same time, other gatherings showed support for the regime, expressions of loyalty and grief. Independent verification inside Iran is severely restricted for foreign media, so gauging the true balance between celebration and sorrow is impossible right now. But one veteran reporter who has spent time there recently shared a strong impression. The appetite for fundamental change has grown noticeably, more Iranians openly yearning to break free from the current order than in past years. We won't pretend to tally crowd sizes or declare winners on public sentiment. That's not our role. What is clear, the U.S. president has openly called on Iranians to seize this opening, describing it as their most promising opportunity in generations to reclaim control. The unknowns loom largest. Will widespread anger translate into organized action capable of toppling the system? Do opposition forces have the cohesion, arms, or momentum needed? An interim figure has reportedly been named to step in, but the regime's staying power remains a question. Removing this central pillar from the fragile Middle East balance is like pulling a load-bearing block from a shaky structure. Consequences cascade unpredictably. Retaliation has already begun. Iranian responses have struck sites in Gulf states like Dubai, Qatar, Doha, and Kuwait, areas many listeners might visit for business or leisure. Protests in Pakistan turned deadly when crowds attempted to overrun a U.S. consulate. Events are moving at breakneck speed. Jeremy Bowen joins us now from home. Hello, Jeremy. Good morning. This feels like the most consequential shift since 1979. Absolutely, in terms of sheer magnitude. Khamenei was only the second supreme leader post-revolution, following the founder Ayatollah Khomeini. His removal opens profound uncertainty about direction. One view, echoed in some American statements, suggests overwhelming military pressure will shatter the regime's grip, allowing ordinary Iranians to step forward once the bombardment eases. The opposite perspective sees the system engineered for durability. Layered institutions, both political and religious, plus the powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps operating as a parallel military force dedicated to regime protection, domestically and externally. Hundreds of thousands serve under its banner. This isn't a fragile dictatorship reliant on a single charismatic figure or family dynasty like some we've seen elsewhere. Can we gauge the regime's damage after these intense 36 hours? Has the core been hollowed out, or could it rebound quickly? The supreme leader's death, plus the loss of other high-ranking figures, represents serious trauma to the structure. The attackers, the world's preeminent military and its strongest regional partner, are pursuing what looks unmistakably like regime change. Initial framing used preemptive, but evidence points to no imminent nuclear breakout or direct assault. The focus on leadership from the start signals intent to dismantle the top. The regime rests on a broad base, millions who genuinely back the Islamic system, viewing external powers as existential threats. It's a nation of over 90 million, vastly larger than places like Iraq. From Israel's standpoint and parts of the U.S., this counts as an enormous strategic victory, neutralizing a leader who repeatedly called for Israel's end. Trump has acted decisively, seizing Venezuela's president recently, now this. For opponents of the regime, the news must feel liberating after years of brutal suppression. Yet calling it over would be premature. Remember past moments of supposed triumph, the mission accomplished banner after Iraq's invasion, or optimistic forecasts for Egypt post-Mubarak that led instead to deeper repression under new leadership. The regime has loyalists willing to use lethal force against their own to preserve order. In a straight military contest, U.S. and Israeli superiority is clear, but Iran has scattered responses across the region, sowing disruption. Trump has pressed Iranians directly. This is your moment to rise. We spoke earlier with a representative close to Reza Pahlavi, son of the last Shah, whose name surfaces in some protest chants. His platform emphasizes a democratic transition where Iranians decide, monarchy or republic, through free choice denied for nearly half a century. Supporters argue millions already back him. Critics question whether a figure tied to the pre-revolution era can unify or command the necessary backing. The path forward looks distant. Iraq after Saddam showed how removing a dictator without a solid plan can unleash chaos. Civil war, hundreds of thousands dead, the rise of groups like ISIS still plaguing the region. Trump isn't promising boots on the ground. He seems to anticipate internal uprisings succeeding through sheer numbers against a heavily armed state. History suggests armed incumbents usually prevail in such mismatches unless fractures appear within security forces. The event itself carries seismic force. One Iranian exile we spoke with described waking her children to share the news. The tyrant is gone. Perhaps one day return home becomes possible. That raw emotion underscores the profundity for those who fled or suffered. Seismic is right. Earthquakes produce aftershocks we can't predict in advance. Retaliation has hit hard. Missiles and drones targeting American-linked sites in Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, even impacting civilian areas like hotels in Dubai. British tourists and others have been endangered. Casualty figures. Iranian Red Crescent reports around 200 dead so far from the initial strikes. One Israeli fatality noted. British forces in the region face direct risk. Hundreds near struck bases in Bahrain, missiles nearing Cyprus bases, likely unintended but highlighting indiscriminate reach. The UK's stance remains guarded. Allies like Canada and Australia endorsed the action outright. Here, Defense Secretary John Healey avoided explicit endorsement despite repeated questions, stressing alliances with Washington and Tel Aviv, while condemning Iran's regime and nuclear ambitions. No full-throated support, no outright rejection. A careful balancing act amid a White House that sees little room for gray areas. Escalation dangers persist. Iranian missiles face interception over Israel, but U.S. naval assets could face swarms. Carriers boast heavy defenses, yet vulnerabilities to drones exist. The regime has shown willingness to strike broadly, including past plots against UK soil thwarted by security services. In Tel Aviv this morning, streets usually bustling sit eerily quiet. No rush hour, schools closed, people sheltering. Warnings of massive Iranian barrages keep life paused. Some residents express long-term relief at diminished threats, yet anxiety about blowback dominates. For Netanyahu, this aligns with core goals, crippling Iran's proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah, proving military resolve backed by American might delivers security. It bolsters his domestic position ahead of elections. This ties into broader global alignments: Russia, China, North Korea, Iran forming counterweights to Western influence. Actions here reverberate everywhere. One overlooked angle: the erosion of international norms. Self-defense claims lack clear substantiation. No UN mandate exists. Civilian protections remain vital, yet powerful states act opportunistically when weakness appears. This reflects raw power dynamics in Trump's second term, decisive moves like the Venezuela operation, now this. More may follow.